by joining us for our Q&A Ask Me Anything tonight that will be going on for the next hour. Well, that's bright. And we will be bringing you friendly neighborhood history for the next hour or so, answering any of your questions related to history, social studies, and the like. So yeah, we are going to be going for the next hour or so. So all of your queries regarding social studies, social sciences, the humanities, I will be happy to answer in a friendly neighborhood manner over the next hour or so. And this is something that we do every Friday and Saturday night at 8 p.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time respectively. And we've been doing it for over a year, this channel, and we've been doing the live stream since May of last year, or June, something like that. Like, those were the early live streams. But we've been doing a lot of these. We've been growing the channel through it. We've been marketing the brand through it. We've been growing and growing. We are now over 7,000 friendly neighborhood historians, people who are subscribing and all of that great stuff. And it's been a really big help for the channel, and we've been growing a lot. So we really appreciate that. And so for the next hour or so, I am happy to give back to my friendly neighborhood historians. All of those of you who like and subscribe are friendly neighborhood historians, and answer whatever questions you have relating to history and social studies. Start your weekend off the right way tonight, continue it tomorrow, and then on Sunday, join us for our live stream lecture where I'll be guiding you through a topic of history. If you like short form content, my channel has plenty of that, uploading every day, and we've got long form content too. On Fridays and Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where you can watch full-length videos on different historical topics. But yeah, if you are joining us and you love history, then you are in the right place. I already see Henry and Harry are here, two of my regulars, two of the friendly neighborhood historians. Thank you so much for being here. Remember to smash the like button and all of that good stuff, and keep the channel growing. And then after this, you can watch my long form video that just dropped right now, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, about Athens and Sparta, the two major Greek city-states. A lot about ancient Greece and ancient history there. So if you enjoy that type of history, you can watch that. And if you continue to enjoy it, you can go and watch my Alexander the Great video right after that, which are long form videos, again, every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we've got a lot of history for you today. We've got a lot of history for you tomorrow, answering all your questions and queries regarding social studies and the like. And then Sunday will be a live stream lecture where I take over the reins and talk about a topic that's interesting to me as a historian that I've been wanting to talk about and share with you guys, kind of running at the mouth from there. And so since I am talking a lot about ancient Greece and all of that, we will be joining you from ancient Greece, from an ancient Greece bazaar or agora, in the city center, perhaps in Athens, perhaps in Thebes or Delphi, or one of the many other Greek city-states that dominated the Peloponnesus, the isthmus at Greece, that you see when you look at Greece, and the mainland above it, with Thessaly in the far north, and all the Grecian islands like Crete, Minos, and of course Lesbos that surround it. So Greek culture and society flourished in the ancient world, and you can't study ancient history without studying the Greeks and their lasting contributions to philosophy, politics, art, and literature. So this is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, and for the next hour or so, I'll be answering all your questions related to history in a friendly neighborhood manner. And I am History Heffner, as you can tell by my Hefner-style dressing gown, and my bunny, Simon the bunny, is not here with us right now, but I hope when he watches this, that he really enjoys it. And we always love having him around as well. He's one of my wonderful moderators who help keep the chat down and keep the channel growing. Really, really appreciate that. We do have Instagram, X, and Facebook, as well as a Patreon where if you don't like the sound of my voice, but you like my thoughts about history, you can read an article or two that I've written, and then a Patreon where I have early access to a lot of content, and of course my First Ladies series there exclusively for my Patreon subscribers, where for behind a paywall you can get added perks and bonuses and all that great stuff. And Instagram and Facebook and X have that too as well. So there you can go to. Why did the Spartans let themselves wither and die instead of reforming until they were conquered, as if they were some archaic freaks left over from a bitter time? Well, their whole thing was about stopping Athens, Harry. So you're referring to the Peloponnesian War, which was the fight between Athens and Sparta for Grecian dominance in the 5th century. The Athenians went throughout the 5th century BC being extraordinarily dominant and influential. And after 75 years of power, they eventually fell, and their Athenian golden age ended when they lost the Peloponnesian War to the Spartans, who proved themselves to be the most dominant military group in Greece. They were allied with the Corinthians and other peoples and really brought it to the Athenians and their allies. There was a whole bunch of Grecian islands and city-states on both the western coast of Turkey and the eastern coast of Greece that supported the Athenians, including the Thessalians, who were to the north of Greece, and they were all defeated, and the Spartans claimed dominance, and this destroyed the Athenian Golden Age. And basically after that, they were warring, divided city-states. Once again, their unity that they had used to fight the Persians throughout the 6th and 5th centuries withered away, and Alexander the Great was the one who would have to unite them. Although it was technically his father, Philip II of Macedon, the great king, who united the Greeks, and Alexander who used that to his advantage, going to and fro and conquering a huge amount of the ancient world. So, yep, there's a little bit on the history of Alexander the Great, ancient Greece. Check out my 2 videos, my long form that just dropped today on Athens versus Sparta that talks more about the Peloponnesian War, and check out my video on Alexander the Great from a few weeks ago that talks about that, but also a lot about Alexander and his conquest of the world. So you are in the right place if you love ancient Greece and its history, because we've got plenty of that here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. Good to see you, Texas. Harsenet's asking, do you think conservatives in Europe will move Muslim immigrants to extremism and terror? I don't know about that. It might be a mutually destructive agreement where conservatives push back in nativist fashion. The AfD and the Polish and Hungarian governments are examples of this, where their anti-immigrant biases, predilections and stereotypes will come out, and that will alienate the largely Muslim immigrant population that are mainly refugees coming from the Middle East. And there will be a growing tension between conservative, nativist, pro-European parties and Islamic peoples whose culture is already so significantly different from that of Western and Central Europeans. Noah, how do you think the rise of the right will be contained? What do you think right will bring? Well, the right is rising right now. Obviously, you have the election of Donald Trump here in the United States in 2024, which obviously surprised a lot of people. Didn't surprise me because I had an accurate prediction about what would happen in that election. Obviously surprised a lot of leaders around the world. A lot of the international community was extremely worried after Trump became president, and they're continually worried because the Europeans in Western Europe do not want to see Putin continue to expand his power and influence. They do not want the war in Ukraine to end, despite the fact that 1 million Ukrainians have died. At the same time, this has also been signaled that there is kind of a slap back against leftist social and economic policies throughout Europe, with the rise of the AfD in Germany becoming one of the most popular political parties there. The Reform Party has become the more favored right-wing party, which is more to the right than the Conservative Party in Great Britain. Pierre Poilievre's rise in Canada, which we'll see in April if he's able to unseat Mark Carney, signals that conservatism in Canada is on the rise. Javier Milei winning in Argentina shows the South Americans moving away from more left-wing socialistic policies and ideologies. So there's a rise of the right all over the world in many places. Netanyahu's control in Israel is another example of this. So we're seeing a shift back towards nativism and nationalism throughout Europe and the Western world. And Trump's election is probably the biggest signal of that, but it's not the only one at all. And I don't know how it will be contained. Shifts to the right happen very quickly and overnight, and shifts to the left are incremental. We'll see how long and how well Trump is able to govern, and that could signal not just disaster for the conservatives in America, but also for conservatives and right-leaning people throughout Europe and South America and other places. Did you do a video on America's first female president called Woodrow Wilson's wife? I haven't done a video about her yet. If you want to subscribe to my Patreon and behind a paywall, you can join, and then you will see my videos on the first ladies. And I just did Lucretia Garfield, so I'm halfway there. I'll be towards Edith and Alice Wilson soon, or Alan Wilson soon. Edith is the one who kind of took control of the White House after Woodrow Wilson had a stroke in 1919 and it served unofficially as our first president, basically controlling what was done by the presidential office until Woodrow left very weak from a stroke he never recovered from and died only a few years later in 1921. So yes, Harry, a very interesting topic, just like Emperor Norton. It's on my to-do list. You look like you WWE Kane. I do not do WWE. I'm not built for that, but thank you. Was Bill Clinton the first black president? No. There was a rumor that President Warren Harding was the first black president, but obviously the first black president was Barack Obama. Socialism is bad. Well, that's not what a lot of people in Europe think. but I know where you're coming from, Texas. Noah, what do you think is the what do you think the problem of democracy in America? I think the problem with democracy in America, I don't think that there's really an existential threat to democracy. Anyone who is claiming their political opponent, especially in a duopoly where you have two political parties that dominate everything, is claiming that their opponent is a threat to democracy and must be stopped, is trying to silence their opponent and is probably a threat to democracy themselves. There's a lot of projection in the statement that this person is a threat to democracy unless they actually exhibit symptoms and evidences of that. They are not necessarily a threat to democracy. A threat to democracy is someone like a Mussolini or a Hitler or a Stalin. Any authoritarian left-wing, right-wing government that has existed has been a threat to democracy because it does not allow people their free and ultimate agency and their free and ultimate choice to make a difference in political elections. That's more of what you would see from Sparta than from Athens if you're going back to ancient Greece, because Athens was one of the first democracies where all the men of the city were able to vote, or all the citizens who owned land, I believe, were able to vote, male citizens. Women could not vote. Women were not considered citizens, and women could not be educated or own land in Athens. But in Sparta, they could. But going back to the ancient Greeks in Athens, where I'm from, right, as you can see right here, the truth of the matter is that the problem of I don't think that there's a necessary threat to democracy. The problem of democracy in America, as in any place, is when you have majority will rules and the people will, you end up getting bad decisions and bad results a lot of the time because people will want to vote for things that they want, and the minority could get really, really intimidated and hurt by this. That is why there are protections, checks and balances, branches of government in the American constitutional system, which are supposed to check just unfettered democracy, where people just vote for things they want, which soon can turn into demagoguery, where you have political candidates promising their constituents something that they can't necessarily deliver, but basically giving away free stuff to people so that they can win. It could be a border wall, it could be healthcare. It's not something that's dominated by either the left or the right, but any political system can be corrupted by demagogues. Given the right-wing lies that were spread on social media during the pandemic, restrictions speech necessary for the health and safety of the public? No. I don't believe that, Henry. I'm going to be as objective as I can here, seeing that the COVID-19 pandemic is what we call contemporary history. It's something that happened in the last 5 years. I can talk about it in a historical lens with as an objective, historical perspective as I can. Now, here on this channel, I'm a free speech absolutist. Anyone can say anything they want and talk about anything they want, and I will engage with their ideas, whether I agree with them or not, because I believe it is more important for people to be able to speak than it is for people to not be able to speak. It is completely unfair to say, I don't like what you are saying, or you are spreading misinformation, therefore you should be silenced. People spreading information about during the COVID pandemic, there were a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different opinions being thrown out. Opinions about lab leaks, vaccines not curing the disease, and other alternative forms of medicine were considered to be anathema and censored and possibly censored speech. And most of that turned out to be true. Not all of it, but some of it turned out to be true. And if it's not true, it's up to people to research and learn things on their own. It is when you start censoring free speech, you lose the opportunity to express ideas. Even bad ideas deserve to be expressed. And I am a victim of this as well. I'm a victim of what we call cancel culture. Not a huge victim. I'm not going to play the victim card, but I recently had a video here up on YouTube that got taken down because somebody, or YouTube community itself, which is run by Google, said that I was committing hate speech in a simple video where I did not commit hate speech. I did not say anything, but I was accused of saying that one race is better than another race. It's absolutely absurdity, and I would redo the video just so that you could see what it's about. But the truth of the matter is, it would get taken down again, and I get in even more trouble. They're just letting me off of a warning because this has never happened before, and it didn't happen in that video. I would never make a video ever that would say that one race is better than another. I may say that one civilization or culture at a particular time in history is better than another. And yes, I do love this picture. Isn't it beautiful? You can see the agora, the open space where people are discussing business terms, politics, philosophy. I think that's supposed to be the Parthenon, so I think this is Athens, the home of ancient Greece's first democracy, and maybe the first democracy ever. So anyways, the truth of the matter is free speech allows people to share ideas even when those ideas are counterproductive or even hurtful or bad for you. And that's just how it is. And I'm a free speech absolutist, so I have no problem with people being able to do that. And as long as they don't incite violence or create a situation where someone could get hurt. There you go. So it's not necessary to contain or curtail free speech. It really isn't. And I understand the safety of the public is a very important thing, but there are differing opinions on how to keep the public safe. This wasn't people saying that we should all just go get COVID and get as sick as we possibly can. These were people who were saying there are alternative ways to deal with COVID. And if you if you see a bad idea, the best thing to do is to let it wear out. Let it run out on its lack of logic and statistics and facts. Go after it, combat it, but don't bring it down a peg. It deserves to be heard because your opinion could be deemed the same way, and you are not the arbitrator of what is right or what is wrong. So, anyways, we're talking a little bit about freedom of speech. We're talking about contemporary history, geopolitics, social studies, ancient Greece, all these great things, because this is the Friendly Neighborhood History channel where we believe in free speech, and you guys get all your questions and queries answered related to history and social studies. So anyways, Noah's saying, explain about the problem of social media as an echo chamber of one party. I don't think that's a problem at all. If you want to make a free speech platform, or a social media platform that is dominated by one political party, then that's fine. Originally, forms like Facebook and X were considered to be dominated by liberals. Threads is an example of it now, and X is now dominated by conservatives. It doesn't really matter that much. It's just people gravitate to social media that they feel will either reflect their values or share information. I use social media to share the message of the Friendly Neighborhood History channel and talk about important social and historical events that are culturally impactful, and that's why I talk about politics and geopolitics from an objectivist lens as I can. So, yeah, for me, there is no problem with that. Free speech, but I'd love to hear why you think there might be a problem with that, Noah. Seth, free speech. Anytime you speak, you risk the risk. You take the risk of offending someone. Yeah, but there is some truth to the notion that if you share an idea that is dangerous, you could end up hurting people, and that definitely is condemnable. But the principle doesn't suffer because of that, in my opinion. Knowledge is everything. No, I mean, I'm more than willing to do a live stream lecture on Sunday about Athens and Sparta because I did my video on it. So No Step, who's been a long-time Friendly Neighborhood historian and is a moderator here and has an excellent history channel that he is in the process of building up right now, or will be soon. He has a great video on there. Mondays and Fridays, we have the long-term videos dropping at 8 p.m. Eastern, and then, of course, we have our Q&A. So maybe that's how you got confused. Yeah. Why do people think the Constitution extends to private businesses and organizations, even though it only applies to the government? Because people think that because the government is responsible for the writing and promulgation and enforcement of the Constitution, that the Constitution of its country does not apply to the government because the government is in charge of the Constitution. It's a civics and governmental and political science illiteracy that is very common on both sides of the pond, my friend. Henry, why was communism more prominent during African decolonization? Excellent question. A huge reason for this is that the Soviets and the Cubans were very influential in spreading communist ideas throughout Africa. And communist ideas caught on because communism, in its basic economic form, then reapplied to a social context, is the haves versus the have-nots, the oppressed versus the oppressor. Those who have exploited those who do not have, and those who do not have need to find a way to create an equal society where everyone has everything. And that was a key motivating factor to colonize people who were exploited and had their economic power extracted from the haves, the powerful empires of Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, all these countries that went in and took land from them. The Belgians were the worst with their human rights abuses in the Congo. Belgium is, for scale, this small. The Congo is this small, is this big. And yet the Belgians controlled them because they believed they were racially superior and they deserved to extract rubber and palm oil from the Congolese at the expense of their own health and safety. It doesn't matter that they get paid dirt wages and get very little in return. What matters is that the Europeans believe themselves to be racially, economically, and culturally superior, so they could justify their exploitation of those people. Since exploitation is a huge cornerstone to Marxist doctrine, and since capitalism seemed to be the engine that had moved forward these countries and empires when they had colonized, during the Industrial Revolution, which I talked about on a live stream lecture a couple weeks ago, Sundays at 4. The truth of the matter is those people looked at capitalism as representing the European colonizers and looked at communism as representing opportunity and freedom and equality. So Kwame Nkrumah adopts socialism in Ghana. It doesn't really work that well. Mugabe uses that as an excuse to kleptocracy in Zimbabwe and horrifyingly terrorizes and oppresses his people. But these notions are popular in Africa because they are seen as anti-European, and the Africans were very anti-European after everything that had happened. So Henry, great question. Harry is asking, but Spartan citizens did have veto power over the Ephros of Sparta and any legislation. The Ephros wanted to pass, could be vetoed, but yes, they could, but they didn't have the ability to vote or make their own laws. And there was a council of elders who ran everything with 2 hereditary kings. So Leonidas, when he is killed at the Battle of Thermopylae, the 300 Spartans, perhaps you're familiar with that incredible story. I have a painting of it here. Nope, I do not have a painting of it. Oh well, we'll go back to Athens. Sorry, trip to Sparta averted. Anyways, the truth of the matter is that he was one of 2 kings who shared a hereditary line, and the Spartans had a very communal idea of things, and that's where Plato got a lot of his ideas for the Republic, which influenced Marx and communism. So everything we're talking about is connected because history is always connected, especially here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. Do you think we will see a rise of print media due to fake news and manipulation on social media? No, print media is actually dying, and the mainstream media is actually one of the main culprits of disinformation, according to most of the people on social media, which is communal news is what's really becoming popular. You get your news from X, YouTube, other sources like that, and you don't care about what the Washington Times or the Washington Post or the LA Times or the New York Post or the New York Times or the London Times or the Guardian or any publication has to say, because you don't give a rat's tail about any of it because you think that it's biased, it's only going to report one side. And you know what? You're right. One of the reasons that I decided to, as objectively as possible, cover the 2020 election, part of it was because I thought it was historic, and it was. But the other part was I realized that the media wasn't reporting this fairly on either side, and so I tried to report it fairly here on YouTube. Go watch those videos when we're done, Noah, and let me know if I did a good job. Good evening, Freshly Wild. Great to see you. Another Friendly Neighborhood historian and moderator, which is definitely a form of democracy. And Sparta Constitution came first. You can make the argument it is the word. No, it is not the world's first democracy. A group of people who run everything and make the laws is an oligarchy. It was communal, but it's a communal oligarchy. Noah, do you think there is some kind of link that is binding society like pre-World War? There were different colonies globally, post-World War, communism and socialism, and then opening of economy right wings. Interesting notion, Noah. I've never really thought of it that way. I think the global market has definitely created a level of interdependence between developing nations, developed nations, and post-developed nations. What do I mean by post-developed nations? We see that a lot of countries, once they reach the phase of development, they actually start lowering their manufacturing and domestic production and start offshoring and outsourcing jobs, economic opportunities under the guise of free trade to other countries. Those countries then start to develop. So as the global economy and globalization and free trade have developed, lifting millions, billions out of poverty in the last century, there has become a global interdependence, and technology has been the main driving force because technology has exponentially increased since the Industrial Revolution, and in the last 30 years it's exponentially increased compared to the first 150 or 60 years of the Industrial Revolution. So do you think Steph's asking, do you think the internet will die when we realize how biased it is, or when AI gets so good that we can't tell fact from fiction? I think the second one is a more likely reason for the internet to die. I think as long people don't care about bias, if the bias revolves around them, if it tells them what they want. The Ephros were elected and the kings were except went on campaign purely military and religious figures. That's not fully true. The Ephors were elected, but they oversaw everything. they ruled over their cities, over the city and the areas around it that Sparta influenced and controlled. The city-state wasn't just one urban area. So the truth of the matter is, most of the, even though they were elected, they were there. They didn't have to face re-election, and they made the rules. AI and Musk will bring the rise of technocracy. I think we are on that way, and I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing when we consider the flaws of all the other ocracies there are. So there will be trade-offs, but there may not. But it may not be as flawed as we might think, as we might be led to think. So, anyways, so this is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. I hope you're enjoying your Friday. Thank you for spending part of it with me. I'm answering all your questions related to history, social studies, and the like. And like I said, I've got 2 videos dropping every week, Mondays and Fridays at 8 p.m. So go check out my video on Sparta and Athens, where I'm coming to you from today on this lovely, lovely Friday evening. Why manufacturing is so hard to push a lot of country focus of service sector more today? Because it's because once a country has developed. Okay, so wealth produces more wealth. This is one of the tenets of capitalism, at least capitalism in the Western sense of the understanding. So the idea is you've made a lot of money from domestic manufacturing and production. You can make even more money if you were to outsource, to focus on a service economy, outsource the manufacturing, and then create a chain of trade with other goods. The goods that are brought to the consumers are cheaper. You can sell more of them, deliver them all through an electronic service like Amazon or eBay, and then they get the device for cheaper, but you sell a lot more of them, so you end up making more money because you outsource to a country that pays far less in wages and maintains far less health standards in their sweatshops, basically, than you do. And so there are trade-offs to all of this, but the truth of the matter is a service, so you can focus on service rather than on production, because the production is done more cheaply elsewhere for you. Harry, they could only serve 1 term and a term lasted 1 year, and citizens in Grecia could veto anything they wanted to. I don't think that's true. You're thinking of the councils in Rome. That I do believe. When was the first concept of a dollar take place, and how was that idea conceived? So the dollar is based on gold or silver or any sort of precious metal used to represent a particular value. So the US dollar used to be based on gold, and it was based on silver. Now it's based on nothing but the US dollar itself, which just shows how really weak the American economy actually is at the end of the day. Paper money, there are banknotes that date back thousands of years. The ancient Mesopotamians had an understanding of banknotes, but not of currency. Paper currency really emerged as a replaceable, renewable resource during the Song dynasty in China. I have an entire series on the Chinese Empire, imperial dynasties, with my last video coming out soon on the Qing. But the Song dynasty of the 11th century created paper notes that would serve as a renewable form of currency to represent the value of bronze coins or copper coins, because they didn't want to run out of the copper. When they ran out of the copper, they would have when they ran out of the copper, they would have to deflate the currency they would have to devalue their currency, which would lead to rampant inflation and a collapse of their economy and market, which had already happened many times before in places like Rome. So the Song did not want to do this. So what they did instead was they used banknotes. They printed banknotes to represent the copper currency, and that is how they would start buying things. So the Song dynasty didn't invent paper banknotes, but they invented a reliable form of currency using paper in the 11th century AD. And if they were found to be abuse their power or be corrupt, they could be charged with a crime and exiled from Sparta. That sounds like the Spartans. Yes, there are different public assemblies based on your ranking, but you couldn't be a member of a Roman Senate unless you were of the patrician class, except for the tribune. Yes, our American money is basically worthless. Sorry, I hate to be a bummer, but American money has no standard on which to base itself other than the fact that it exists. So, anyways. moving right along. We've talked about ancient Greece, we've talked about ancient Sparta, we've talked about the invention of money and Song Dynasty China. We've been going all around the world talking about a lot of great history and current history, talking about COVID-19, the history of free speech a little bit, things like that. Will Greenland be the next banana republic? Not if the USA buys it. I don't know what's happening in Greenland. I don't know much about its government other than it's technically run by the Danes. Why do I dress like that? Well, this is a smoking jacket, and smoking jackets became popular in the 19th century in Great Britain. After the Crimean War, British officers would bring home would bring home Turkish tobacco that the Ottomans, their allies in that war, gave to them. They defeated the Russians, they came home, and the officer corps would wear these to cover their street clothes from getting dirty from tobacco that was becoming more and more popular in pipes and cigars. So these are called smoking jackets because they cover you from smoke. And although it sounds pretty provincial, they've actually become very nice, flowy, velour, velveteen gowns that are very enjoyable, very, very upscale robes. And so one of my Patreons, got me this for a holiday gift, and so I'm using it now, and it's my uniform, and I really love using it on the channel, and I have a couple videos talking about smoking jackets and stuff like that. So it is my uniform. It turns me from just my normal, average, everyday self into History Heffner at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel with my friendly neighborhood historians, over 7,000 of them. Those are the people who have liked and subscribed. So what is the greatest strength of the U.S. economy, according to you? Well, the greatest strength of the U.S. economy is its ability to trade internationally and globally. It has been its ability to produce in the past. Now it's its ability to exchange and to trade that has made it extraordinarily wealthy. America's economy has been very strong because of the influence of America geopolitically. The U.S. dollar has become one of the dominant currencies, and even if it's not necessarily backed up by any sort of specious cash like gold or silver, it has become it has become the gold standard itself, so perhaps surpassing that value in some ways. Whereas gold is hard to get, money is easy to print. So this has become the gold. So the U.S. dollar, no pun intended, is the gold standard for many countries around the world, where it is accepted constantly as a form of exchange. So the influence of the dollar itself, the influence of American trade, the dependence of American companies on foreign labor, and that means foreign markets, on American companies and businesses and their products, the inventions that have been made in America, the patents sold in America, so ingenuity, innovation, international trade, international reliance on U.S. companies, inventions, and the gold standard of the dollar itself has made the American economy as strong and prolific as it is. And America, even if it's in a recession, even if the housing market isn't good, usually tends to be on the top, and has been ever so formidably since the end of World War III in 1945. I know this is probably way overly discussed now, but I discovered the Panama history, and that stuff is pretty crazy. The French started it and failed. That one guy convinced the U.S. to build a canal. Yeah, that's the Panama Canal. Panama's history is quite interesting itself. The Scottish actually tried to form an American colony called Caledonia in Panama, modern-day Panama. It was owned by the Colombians. President Teddy Roosevelt led a revolution there so that he could build the canal that the French had failed. Thousands of Frenchmen had died building it, and then a few hundred Americans died. It was not... Can you guys hear me? Okay, so it was not an easy process at all for the Americans to do, but they eventually got the Panama Canal and then gave it back 65 years later. Well, actually at the end of the century for $1. Even though the nation of Panama only existed because the Americans wanted to build a canal. So, and quaestors and half of the aediles called curule aediles were elected by the plebes, and of course the tribunes and the plebes. Yes, elected by the plebes, but not necessarily plebes themselves. Understand the distinction between different social classes. And the plebeian assembly could veto anything legislation passed by the Senate, and tribunes could veto Senate legislation. Not all the time. And that wasn't part of the early Roman model. So the early Republican model in Rome did not have that. But yes, very, very true. And it was the discovery of how mosquitoes infected you with yellow fever, which was one of the major breakthroughs in medicine. What discovery? I don't know that exact discovery. Why the Scandinavian country economy model is hard copy in U.S.? Hey, because the Scandinavians don't have a large military that they pay for that keeps other countries safe routinely. The USA pays the military bills of Israel, Canada, the United States, and Germany, and NATO, for the most part. I'm not saying overwhelmingly, but 70% of NATO spending is US military. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying it's a thing that affects America's ability to provide other social services that people are constantly asking for. So something's got to give at some point. They also had an improvement in with the big steam shovels and the lots of the native. I think they brought in Chinese laborers as well, but I could be wrong. Also died. Oh yeah, you're talking about the Panama Canal. I don't think they brought in Chinese laborers. That's more the railroads in the transcontinental western half of that in the 1860s and then onward. The Russians sold Alaska for how much and why was it sold? Actually, it was 7.2 million. It was a lot more in today's money. I forget how much it is. They sold it. They had no interest in continuing an American empire. They needed the money to fund their own industrial revolution. They were late to the party compared to the British, the French, and the Americans. And the United States wanted it because William Seward, the U.S. Secretary of State, thought that it would be a good idea. There were no really great resources in Alaska that they knew about, and it just seemed like a barren wasteland and an absolute stupid idea, which is why it was called Seward's Folly. When they got there, they discovered lumber, which was extremely important. Later, the gold rush, the Klondike gold rush and other gold rushes brought more people. And eventually, the black gold, oil, made Alaska a huge place for settlement. So they always had public assemblies, but they didn't have the tribunes. The assemblies were made up of plebes who voted on different legislation but could never become senators and never had representation in the Senate until they got the tribunes. So the tribunes was a branch between the two, a connection between the two branches of government there. And yes, like Ryan, a longtime friendly neighborhood historian, is saying, like and subscribe to become one today. But anyways, so, okay. So let's see. Anyways, what questions do you have about history, social studies, and the like? I'm here to answer it, and I'll be here for the next 20 minutes or so answering your questions about history and social studies. We'll be back again tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to do it again because it's a lot of fun, and I really love doing it, and you guys really love getting your questions answered, so. Why does Europe love going to war with itself? Well, I think when familiarity and closeness breed contempt, and it happens in other places of the world. Europe is the smallest continent other than Australia, and it's the largest inhabited populous continent proportional to its size. So Europe is super small, but it's super inhabited, and these countries are all very close together, and they're mushed together, and you get more interaction, you get more cultural exchange, you get more commercial trade, you get more religious exchange, leading to kind of a monolithic religious structure, which is why the Catholic Church had such great ability to control it during the medieval era. But the truth of the matter is that Europe, for the most part, is, because it's so close, that familiarity breeds contempt, as we know, and that has led to a lot of fighting and warfare. Lands that are close to each other means that people can both claim them at the same time. The 100 Years' War is an example of this, as King Edward III believed he was the true king of France because his mother had been the daughter of the king. I think it was Philip VII. And that led to 116 actual years of warfare between England and France. Germany really didn't exist. It was the Holy Roman Empire, which was broken into different areas that were all kind of competing with one another, and Austria and Prussia were the two main ones, and because of that, Austria and Prussia went to war a bunch of times. One of them was World War I, or what I call World War I, the French-Indian or 7 Years' War in the 1750s. Russia is huge and expansive and is always expanding, and that puts pressure and tension on it with other countries, the Balkans and the Ottoman Turks. And so that's happened. There have been wars to create countries, like the Germans finally created a country through the Prussians winning wars with the Austrians and gaining more land and influence, and the Italians basically uniting Italy through war and struggle. So there's a lot of different reasons. Thanks for the compliment. There's a lot of different reasons, Henry, that Europe goes to war with itself so much, but it's because you're so close together is one of the big reasons. The same reason that the French speak German, no matter what the White House press secretary says. saying that the French would be speaking German nowadays if we had left the French alone, which is ridiculous, which inspired my hot take video about World War III or World War II, as you guys know it, which got me in trouble and got removed because it was hate speech apparently, and I was a white supremacist, which is interesting because that's not me. Hello. Do you think someday we could meet and make Hamburger Helper together? Anytime. Anytime. You name the date and place. When I get back from Athens, I'll try to be there. What do you think of the HRE that was not holy nor Roman nor an empire? I love that phrase from Voltaire because the Holy Roman Empire wasn't holy because although it was supposed to originally start with originally all of those things could apply to it because Charlemagne, the first Holy Roman Emperor who was crowned in 800, pissing off the Byzantine Empress Irene of Athens. Interestingly enough, Charlemagne was crowned by the Pope, did rule over Italy, so he was holy. He was the he was the king of the Romans, and he was an emperor. He had a huge empire. The Carolingian Empire controlled all of Germany, all of France, large portions of Spain and Italy, and all the way down to Hungary. So he had an empire, and basically that was divided, and eventually one of his son's lines became the Ottos that would rule, and Henry's that would rule over most of what is now modern-day Germany, and that is when the Holy Roman Empire stopped being so holy and Roman. The Pope did keep crowning them until the 15th century, but then after that, the Habsburgs took over, who were an Austrian family, and by then, the Holy Roman Emperor was being elected by princes and dukes who ran the different areas of Germany, the little counties or principalities inside of what is now Germany, with Austria and Prussia being the two biggest and most influential ones. And it wasn't an empire anymore. There were no Italians, so it wasn't Roman. And it wasn't holy because the Pope had taken his finger off the scale. And the Holy Roman Empire is, by the way, not so holy. When started by the Catholic Church, the Protestant Reformation starts there and leads to more division. And leads to more division between the different German principalities and undermines the power, prestige, and religious influence of the emperor. So the Protestant Reformation is really the nail in the coffin of this idea that it was a Holy Roman Empire. And for most of its history, it was maybe one or two of those. Very rarely was it ever all three of them. So Voltaire was corrected. It was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. What do you think of Henry VIII as a king if you take away the wives? I love Lucy Wooding's book on the Tudors, and I love what she said. If Henry VIII had died in 1529 when he was still married to Catherine of Aragon, hadn't left the Catholic Church, and England was proud and prosperous, and he hadn't blown through all the money his father had given him, he would be considered maybe the best English king. And I think that he is a decent ruler. He's cruel, but he's also noble, brave, hardworking. He's an interesting guy. It's hard to ignore him, and that's why some of my most popular videos on this channel have been me talking about Henry VIII. The first video that ever broke 10,000 views was about Henry VIII and his 6 wives, because people are fascinated by this literally and figuratively larger-than-life individual who controlled such a huge amount of influence in the world. So I think if you take away his issues with his wives, he has problems. He spent way too much. He was way too corrupt and way too brutal. Look at Cromwell and More, these two men who were killed for almost no reason. The wives were his downfall, but it really wasn't until the 1530s, after his injury and his jousting affair, that he started to become more and more erratic. What if Canada won the War of 1812 and takes the U.S.? Canada was not part of the War of 1812, and the British, who controlled Canada, did win the War of 1812. Sorry. A lot of Americans like to think the Americans did not lose the War of 1812. I'm sorry. You did. It's that simple. You got your capital burned. Go away now, as Critical Drinker likes to say. There's another good YouTube channel. How does Norway handle their natural gas or oil? I don't know exactly how they handle it. I imagine they refine it. The emperor wasn't even allowed an opinion on religion. That sort of defeats the purpose of a holy part of his title. Yeah, but they took one. Charles V, Sigismund I, these guys took one. Sigismund killed Jan Hus after promising him safety. Charles V tried to hunt down Luther. I mean, they definitely had an opinion. Why does the USA have black and whites fight? Well, I mean, so you have a history of racism, slavery, segregation, and continual political exploitation of these historical facts that has led to more division. There are social and economic disparities that come about as of this, and as well as cultural differences. And of course, the racial differences themselves, which have become the least major reason, but still a reason nonetheless, that you have disparities, fighting, and division. And once again, familiarity breeds contempt between white European Americans and African Americans. And yes, great questions indeed. Why did the Templars get disbanded? Philip VI was extraordinarily paranoid and suspicious of their influence and power. He believed they were basically trying to undermine his throne and were doing the Pope's bidding and did not serve him directly as knights, so therefore he wanted them disbanded. Even in Canada, we will still say the British and the settlers within the Canadian colonies won the War of 1812. Absolutely. Because London didn't get burned. Toronto, Ottawa, Quebec, none of Ontario, these places didn't get burned up. Obama stirred the pot. He is evil. Okay, you're entitled to your opinion. That doesn't make you right. Do you think Patton was assassinated? There's an interesting story about this. George S. Patton, one of the greatest U.S. generals in history, World War III, or as you call it, World War II. I think it's the Third World War. Led a tank brigade, rescued the soldiers of the Battle of the Bulge, won all these huge battles in North Africa, relieving Montgomery, managed the Italian campaign, basically took Italy out of the war single-handedly. He was so adept. One of the most fascinating, erratic, and ill-tempered individuals in American history, but one of the best generals in American history. And he wanted the U.S. at the end of the war to invade the Soviet Union. He thought the Soviets were weak and on their toes, and we could do it. And it didn't. No one kind of went along with it, and because of that, when he dies in a car accident soon afterwards, they think that somebody tried to kill him. I don't see any reason to kill Patton. You're going to need him even if you don't go to war in Europe again. There's this fear during the beginning of the Cold War in the late 40s that the Russians will invade Eastern Europe and with their satellite states will attack Germany and Central Europe, and so that there will be another world war in Europe. And you're going to need every great general you've got if you're the U.S. So if you're the government guys and you're sneaky and conniving, you're not going to kill your best general. Why does the Hitler dies... Do you think the area with natural minerals and oil are exploited? All the time. That's what leads to such environmental decay and disaster. Why does the Hitler die is controversial? Because there are people who believe that Hitler, like other Nazi high officials, was able to flee to Argentina. There was no body ever discovered, but that's because they blew up his bunker. He took cyanide and shot himself. His girlfriend, then wife, Eva Braun, also shot herself, or also took cyanide. It is my understanding the British lost the War of 1812 on one of the rivers up north in New York. There was many American victories, like in Lake Erie, that are quite impressive. New Orleans is definitely one of them. Fort McHenry, where we get the Star-Spangled Banner, as Francis Scott Key sees the flag was still standing there. That comes out of the War of 1812. There's a lot of Americana that's really important to the War of 1812 that makes America great initially, I guess. But the truth of the matter is that the British basically just decided to stop fighting because they didn't need to fight us anymore. The reason the war happened was because the Americans were angry that the British were taking American sailors and cargo and stealing them, basically. Sorry, Harry, they were stealing them. They had no reason or right to take them. If it was up to the American government to get rid of British sailors who were on American ships, they didn't do that, so the British were stealing them, taking them back. It's called impressment, and that caused James Madison, under pressure from hawks in Congress, to go to war in the Declaration of War, America's first declaration of war in the War of 1812. And they were only doing this. The British were only taking this cargo and stuff because the French were at war with them under Napoleon. So because of that, the British needed as many supplies and men as they possibly could get. And so the main conflict was with Napoleon. The main conflict was not with the Americans. And by the time Napoleon got banished to Elba, they really didn't see the need to continue the war with the Americans anymore. They didn't really want to retake America. The idea that the British fought this war to retake America is a ludicrous, insane idea that I first came up with when I was 9 and then realized later I was wrong about. Basically, the British wanted to bully America on the high seas, but only because they needed the supplies and manpower to fight Napoleon, the French were doing the same thing, by the way, but not to the greatest extent that the British were. So basically, the British are able to fight Napoleon, the greatest general of all time, keep him from invading England, and also handle the Americans well in the War of 1812, just showing how British naval dominance allowed them, with less people than the French and less land than the Americans, to win two very, very, very important wars. So Harry, I did give the British a lot of credit there. Drew, what do you think happened to JFK's brain? Why do they not exhume him for more information on his assassination? I don't think that his brain, which literally exploded, is going to do much to help us understand, unless you're looking at trajectory, entry wounds, and stuff like that. I suppose they could do that, but that's morbid, and I don't think the Kennedy family would ever want that. The Kennedy family has believed the official Warren report. The deviation has been from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., his nephew. Do you think Caesar was a good ruler for the Roman people? Yes, but he was an even better ruler for himself. Why did Saddam go from being an American ally to a number enemy? Not much of an ally. I mean, the U.S. kind of liked him when he was fighting the Iranians, because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The Americans have never learned that lesson. They thought that the Soviets were their friends during World War III. They were wrong. They thought that Saddam and Osama were their allies in the 80s. They were wrong again. He went to his invasion of Kuwait really upset Americans and Westerners who believed he had no right to do this and steal all this oil. So they went in and almost took him out, and then 12 years later decided to finish the job. What do you think about the president justify about the nuclear bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki? So President Harry Truman killed more people than any other U.S. president. It's over 100,000 because of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs. Truman was a pretty good leader, and I think made that decision because he realized that an invasion of Japan or starving the island out would lead to more suffering than that. And that was what all of his aides were telling him. So I think the justification was there would be more Japanese who actually died without bombs. And they were hoping the Japanese would surrender after one bomb. They had a third bomb ready for Tokyo, and they would have used that, which would have killed hundreds of thousands. But the truth of the matter is the Americans did not want as many Japanese casualties as possible. Name someone, we'll draw them, please. Don't say something complicated about it. Huh? Gagik. Name someone, we'll draw them. I don't know what you're saying, Gagik. Could you put that back in the chat, please? Are we? Yeah. My babysitter was one of Hitler's secretaries. She says he was placed on a plane then submarine to Argentina. Wishful thinking. His brain was stolen out of the archives. I know Lieutenant General for a long time with the highest. Did the general rank exist? No, I'm not sure what you mean, Drew. Do they think they released everything from JFK files or not? I think they have, but there are supposedly things that are still missing that might have gone lost. I don't know. There is information that seems to imply that M16, not M16. It's the British CIA. They knew something was going to happen and tried to tell the Americans. World War III. Yes, Michael, I believe that there have been 3 world wars. The French-Indian/7 Years' War of the 1750s is World War I, the Great War is World War II, and World War II is World War III. That's the Nazis and the German and the Japanese and all that. France wanted to do it to the same extent as Britain, but he couldn't because Britannia ruled the waves and we suspended the orders in council before America declared war. Interesting. Rank the best top president, top 5 in USA. I've done this a lot, and I'm happy to do it again for you. I'll have to do a tier ranking one day. Lincoln is top for me. I think that one's easy. Washington is second, maybe the only other guy who could be considered the best president, in my opinion. After that, I've got Theodore Roosevelt, changed America, terraformed it, brought in progressive statutes, and increased America's military presence, basically made America an international superpower. Won the Nobel Prize, just an incredible guy. After that, it's tricky for me with 4 and 5. I think Jefferson is 4th, and Kennedy is 5th. I'm not going to put FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, in that conversation because I think Franklin Roosevelt is highly overrated. Right outside the top 5, you've got Reagan, Dwight Eisenhower. One of those guys would be good in the top 5. I'd be happy with either of them in your top 5. There are definitely presidents that have gotten underrated and overrated, and we need to change that. And there are presidents who are underrated who could easily be in the top 10. So yeah, that's my top 5. Lincoln, Washington, Theodore Roosevelt, Thomas Jefferson, and John F. Kennedy. Name someone from ancient history, and I'll try to draw them. I would prefer Greece. Oh, wow. Thank you, Geek. Wow, I would love to see that. I'm sure that's incredible. And you guys can email me that. You can email me that. And you guys can email me with comments, feedback, or if you have other questions, you want to have a longer conversation with me over texting, basically, you can email me at friendlyneighborhoodhistory@gmail.com. All of these social media handles, Patreon, Substack, email, they are in my YouTube page. So just go to my YouTube page and you'll get that. Like a geek, I give you Leonidas, the great Spartan king. No, the Warren Report and the truth will never come out. It has been, they did declassify it. Okay, who is the best living president in your life? Ooh. This is going to be a win by default because every president in my life has been underwhelming compared to the men I've just talked about. Probably Clinton. Other than his scandals, Clinton was actually a pretty good president, more or less. Do you think Obama shouldn't have gotten the Nobel Peace Prize? No, I don't think he should have. He didn't do anything to get it. The Arab Spring turned out to be a mistake. Any sort of intervention in the Middle East, whether it's by Republicans or Democrats, I don't care. It's been a mistake by the U.S. It's one of the biggest blunders in foreign policy history ever, let alone in U.S. history. It's easily the worst. So no, I don't think that Obama should have won the Nobel Prize any more than Trump should have won the Nobel Prize. Trump did more for Middle East peace than Obama did, and he didn't win the Nobel Prize. He wasn't even nominated for it. So, or maybe he was by Republicans in Congress who love everything he does. Was the idea that Saddam possessed WMDs a complete fabrication to justify war? I don't know, Yahan. I vacillate between that. The Bush administration wanted to export democracy. There's this idea that maybe they were trying to finish Daddy's war. George Bush Sr. started the war in Kuwait. I think a lot of people really honestly believed it and wanted it to be true in the Bush administration. I think Colin Powell thought it was true. I think other people who had more inside knowledge knew it wasn't true and did it anyways. And I'm looking at you, Dick Cheney. I'm not looking at him. I don't want to look at him. Actually, Richard Dick Nixon, I bet you mean, created the EPA and the Credit Protection Agency and a few other things. My parents adored Richard Nixon, so he has some redeemable qualities. Yes, he definitely does. Nixon is just Watergate, and they throw that on him and how paranoid he was. But he was actually an able and capable leader. If he hadn't done Watergate or owned up to it, he would be considered one of the better presidents in American history. He might be on my top 10 list. So, James, if you like that, go check out my 2 videos. I do one good and bad thing about each president. It was my President's Day special, and they're both long-form videos. And I did one from Monday. They come out 8 p.m. Mondays and Fridays, where I talk about I summarize each president in 1 sentence or less. And next Monday, I'm doing the monarchs of England in 1 sentence or less. What presidents are there no known photographs of? The first 5. We have, and I believe Andrew Jackson. No, we have a photo of Andrew Jackson. Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe. John Quincy Adams is the first president to have his photograph taken after his presidency. The first president to be photographed in William Henry Harrison also. The 9th president was not photographed, if I'm correct. The first president to be photographed in office, I think, is James Polk, our 11th president. So 6 presidents. William Henry Harrison would be the extra one, along with the first 5. Great question, Drew. The only thing about TR is he gave us Woodrow Wilson. Yeah, Harry, he indirectly did that, and he hated Woodrow Wilson. He thought he was a horrible president and wanted to run against him in 1916. Have you been to any of the presidential libraries? Yes, I have. Thank you, Gagik. Good luck with that. Guyan, I understand why people don't like Bill Clinton, but if you look at America when Clinton was president, not bad. Not bad at all. It's that era that kind of around when I was born. For me, it's Trump. He had the greatest comeback of all time. Yes, freshly, I agree with you there that Trump has had the greatest political comeback in American history from January 6th to being president again. From a felony conviction, it's incredible what he was able to do. That doesn't make him a great president. Do you think Trump will go down in USA? No, I think Trump's going to be around, and I think nothing's going to take him out. I think he'll be president for the next 4 years, and then who knows? It doesn't look like it looks like Americans are going to be back to they have to pick the lesser of the 2 evils, and the Republican Party will be the party that's lesser of the 2 evils in the next 4 years, assuming the trends keep up, because the Democrats have become extremely unpopular in the U.S. Nelson Mandela was not a good person in communist South Africa as a hellhole. Your thoughts? I don't see him as a communist. He was not always a good person. I know the African National Congress terrorized and killed people, especially when he was in prison fighting apartheid. They did it violently. And there is a lot of anti-white sentiment in South Africa that's absolutely shameful. But South Africa is not in great shape, but that's not Mandela's fault. I'm a big fan of Nelson Mandela. Nobel Prize and the Medal of Honor is overrated today since it passed out like candy. Not fully untrue. Seth Williams, what did Clinton do? What was great about his term? Balancing the budget, welfare reform. Clinton is a liberal at heart, but he knew how to make Congress work in a bipartisan way, and that hasn't happened since he was president. There hasn't been bipartisan communication other than the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Democrats and Republicans have become so polarized since Clinton. It's absurd. The Republicans and the Democrats were willing to still work together. So there's a little bit of a more decency, at least on the surface, of American politics during Bill Clinton's presidency. I'm not saying anything about his character as a person. I'm saying what's going to keep him from Mount Rushmore is the fact that he had those affairs and the Whitewater scandal. And yeah, Guyahan, I've listened to Richard Nixon. He's a fascinatingly intelligent man. Harry, in the UK, we have had so many inquiries in public assemblies into the WMDs. They did believe it was, at least Tony Blair did genuinely believe there was a threat. And Saddam was a threat, and he had used them before, and he wanted to use them again and make a bomb. Turns out, all hogwash. Top 5 most controversial presidents. Ooh. Well, I think Bill Clinton might be on that list. Controversial. You might want to do the worst, but the top 5 most controversial presidents. Controversial. It's just hard for me. I think that Trump is definitely number 1. Most controversial president. I think that modern presidents get more controversy because the issues are still impacting America directly. I think that Clinton's on that list. I think Ronald Reagan's on that list. I think Kennedy's on that list only because of his death. And I think FDR's on that list. Notice how I mentioned no president from before the 1900s. Because most of them were... Grover Cleveland should be on that list because Grover Cleveland probably assaulted a woman and then tried to shut her up after she had his baby. Do with that what you will. Maria Halpin. Look it up. It's a sad story. And it's one of the reasons I haven't done a video on it because Grover Cleveland was a scumbag, a real life scumbag. How old were you when Clinton was president? I was around. Trump for 12 more years. Well, yeah, I don't think that's possible. What do you think about Thomas Jefferson? Definitely one of the best presidents in American history, an excellent founding father, morally compromised individual. Why is history defined by war? Henry's asking a great question. Well, the truth of the matter is it's not always defined by war, but war changes things so much that it is a defining moment. Just like the COVID-19 pandemic has changed history, it is almost like a war in its impact. Why do people want the government to spend more money but pay less taxes? Because they think that the government gets its money out of thin air because it can print it. So, Seth, we are so divided. Thank you for that answer, man. I like to know things were less crazy back then. I just barely missed it. I was too young to know. Yeah, Clinton was not a perfect president and is far from a perfect individual. And the Clintons have a lot of skeletons in their closets. And the reason his wife didn't win was because everyone saw her as corrupt, and she is. But the truth of the matter is that during his presidency, from the objective historical facts, Clinton actually didn't do a half bad job running the country. He's almost like the Tiberius of the United States. And I did an entire series on the Roman emperors, shorts about their lives. And Tiberius, the second Roman emperor, very corrupt, very dirty-minded, not someone you would want to be around if you want to keep a good, moral, clean nose, but not a bad administrator. Harry, and why do you think people think taxes are everything? It's beyond belief. How people believe taxes are the end of the world? Well, because you have so many different taxes that seem almost redundant. There's no sort of flat, normal tax rate. There are so many taxes for everything, it seems like. My belief is the most ridiculous tax ever invented in human history was the capital gains tax. You make money. That money is taxed. You take that money. You invest it in the market with no help from the government whatsoever. You don't drive on a road. You don't do that. You get it. You go to a broker. You get Robinhood, you do all of these things. The internet you pay for is not provided by the government. You invest. You make money. The government taxes the money you made. That had nothing to do with them. For me, that's asinine. That is beyond asinine. Nixon, Trump, Harding, Lincoln, FDR, all controversial. Yep, and most of them died in office, which is quite interesting. Yeah, Nixon has to be on the most controversial list. Take off Reagan. Didn't Warren Harding have an illegitimate child too? Yes, but not by taking advantage of a woman, if you know what I mean, Drew. Washington is controversial if you're an 18th century loyalist. Yes, and everybody here is not that except Harry. He also benefited from the baby boom is entering into their peak earning years, so the tax revenues were also their highest point. They were entitled so unfairly in favor of the rich. Yep. Clinton getting a what in the Oval Office? Yes, I know what he got in the Oval Office. Could all be that lucky. Harry's saying, which founding father wanted there to be hereditary titles and a way to address the president like His Majesty like we do? If I'm correct, that's Franklin, and Washington hated that and just decided to be Mr. President because he didn't replace King George III to become King George I, and that's why, Harry, unfortunately, we don't have a king. You guys have a king. We don't have the king, but it's okay because your king doesn't do anything. Sorry, I'm just messing with you. Anyways, so we are just over an hour in. He had a code word for it. I think it was Diet Coke, getting Diet Coke or something like that, which is crazy. The government is like a guy standing on the corner panhandling. I never see him, but his hand is in my pocket all the time. The guy don't be mean to the people on the street. They don't always put their hand in your pocket. The government does, though. Death and taxes, the only two sure things in life. What do you think about Chief Seattle's speech? Does it make you cry? Chief. I haven't read it. Are you referring to the Indian chief? I haven't read it. Can anarcho-mutual aid scale to the size of a functional country? No. Anarchy cannot scale. Because it's not possible. It doesn't work in a neighborhood or a classroom, let alone that. Yep, and you have a good day as well, Seth. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. We are over an hour. I'll have to read Indian. Native American. I know you're trying to say not Indians from South Asia, but Native American's more appropriate. Indian is not referring to India, but to Indios in God. And thank you, Guy Han. They are so awesome. I'm always doing my best. You're very welcome, Angel. My pleasure. We will be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. Take care. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Remember to like and subscribe. Go check out that long-form content. Consider the Patreon. Consider the Substack. Consider my social media. And thank you. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful Friday evening. And I will see you all again tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern time. Take care. And remember, love history.